Now I got my box off. I elected to just remove the box because it was going to be a lot harder to do all the stuff overhead, and I'll get better welds when I have the box off. It only took me about an hour to pull the box off, so it was no big deal. I can see that there's a little more damage than I thought there was. If you look in here, you can see that this end link is bad, so the whole rear end is moving slightly. And then as well as this stupid third link design, which I'm going to redo. And a few other things. I'm going to weld these brackets on for the bumper a little better, and reinforce the bumper for some bumper pulling, and of course add a cross member here for my 2 5/16 ball. So I have this all welded up, these bars welded together, and now I'm welding it to the frame. Now first I start off with a few tacks to get it into place, make sure it's square. And now you can see here that I have this gap because of the angle that the frame comes up. I touched on the inside but not on the outside, which is fine because I wanted extra penetration. So first I'm going to do a root pass, which is going to be up in here as far as I can get it, and it's going to bind this and this, and then I'll go over with a nice fat wide pass for the final pass. I did the same thing back here. You can see there's a little bit of a root weld there just to build up, to fill that little bit of gap. And you can see this is nice fitment, it's very close. Fit my finger in there still, which is perfect. That right there is close, and this is the lowest it can possibly go. And I welded the nut on the back side of there, so I can just thread it in from the top, and yeah, now I'm just gonna weld it all up. So if you remember on my third link bar, which is right here, it had a stupid end with a straight bolt and some rubber bushings, and it just wasn't right. It was built kind of old school and not proper. So what I'm doing is basically all I did was I took and I drilled out that bung. It had a about a 3/4 inch bolt threaded in there, which was already welded in this bung, and this tubing is 1.25 inches inside. And I wanted this to a 1-inch opening inside, so I could take this end link, which is by BC Fab, comes with the weld in bung and the lock nut, and it also comes with the poly bushing and a grease cert. Now this fits in there. I just drilled it so it fits in there. You can see it's nice and V'd, but what I'm going to do now is just take a countersink and countersink this edge so I get extra penetration. Basically, the more gap there is, the better to a point for weld penetration. And since I'm using a MIG, that's important. Ideally, you'd want to TIG this setup, but yeah, I'm using a MIG, and this will be adjustable because this is a threadable rod end. Now, when you're welding on the bung like this, you want to make sure to have your rod end fully threaded through. So this is all the way through, and it's basically holding all the threads inside this bung to shape when I weld, because it'll get hot and it'll stretch. Otherwise, you'll have to re-tap out the bungs. Alright, check it. What I'm working on here is this third link. If you remember before, it was a stupid setup. So now I'm just using a conventional rod end from BC Fabrication, and I made some plates. Excuse me. Made some plates out of 3/8 steel, and then I V-grooved the edges so I can get good weld penetration. You can see they're both identical, and they come up like this. And you can see there that the weld will have good penetration area. Has a weld on the back and the weld up in there. And then I'll put a couple gussets on there. So I'm going to tack this up, tack in the gussets, and then I'll take this cross member out. Since it bolts in, I'll take this cross member out, flip it over, and weld it so that I know it's going to get good penetration versus trying to weld overhead up into there. Another thing of note here, I do have this rod end somewhat tightened up on these brackets, but not all the way tight. When you're welding on this stuff, you want to make sure that this is out of here, or you have a donor bushing that's going to melt, because obviously if it gets too hot, it's going to melt. So what I do instead is I tack it in a few spots so it can't get very hot down here, and then I take it apart and then I finish weld it. You can take and tack in like a like say maybe even a bolt or anything like that, just to keep this open right here. But if you tack it in enough places and have enough gussets, it should not move. Now you can see I have this welded pretty much all the way around. This one here is probably the nicest weld. Anyways, it'll work. You can see that there is the V fillet or the V groove that I ground in it. So you can see that the penetration was pretty good. And that's that there. Now I can clean it up and prime it and paint it and put it back in the car. Now I was gonna add another gusset to it, but this is so strong I don't think I'll need it. Woo! Crocs and socks! Woo! Some of you might not know what a bad shock looks like. This is a bad shock. This is off the rear. Obviously the bushings are shot, and the shock should actually expand itself on its own, but it's just that bad that it doesn't. Now, you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm barely even touching that, and it has no force to it at all. There's the force up in the top, but then so yeah, this shock is shot. So if your shock doesn't expand itself, then it's bad. If it goes up and down inconsistently, then it's bad. And new shocks should be very hard to compress with just your two hands. They should be strong enough for, I don't know, a couple 100 pounds, I guess, of weight. Obviously you can tell they've been leaking too because they're all covered in grease. So it's time to upgrade to the Bilstein. I've been having good luck with those Bilstein shocks overall over the past couple years on a couple cars, so that's why I upgraded. Now I have the shocks mounted and the secondary cylinders or reservoir and the new airlift dominator bags D2600 in the back. I have my hitch ball crossmember all welded in, and then this hitch ball just comes out, so I'll be able to get it from the top, thread it in and out, so I don't have to have two wrenches. And then I added these strap tie downs today. Obviously they're just they're pretty tight in there. I might end up taking them out and putting a washer, so it's easier to just spin this over. Those are bolted in there with 1/2 inch fine, just grade 5 bolts. Probably could have used grade 8, but I had those here, one on each side. And if you notice, they are separate from this crossmember, so if this crossmember happens to let loose, these will still be here. I could have elected to weld them up here, but then if this crossmember just breaks off, then the whole thing comes. And also, when you look here, the top of this crossmember is about level with the top of this, so my bed floor will still sit flat. I added a little brace from this crossmember back to there just for funsies. It's just actually a stop sign post. It's pretty rigid. I have the 3-link set up there welded on. I made a new exhaust hanger. Have another crossmember here, which is also a stop sign post, and then I'm doing some beefing up on this rear bumper. And I welded up pretty much everywhere that I hadn't had welds. This was all just a bolt-in type notch at the time, but I welded everything too, so it's a little more rigid now. There's no flex. I cleaned up some wiring. It's still kind of a mess, but it's a rat rod, and yeah. So my stupid ass is on the way to the ER to get some stitches. Woohoo! The cutoff wheel kind of slipped, hit a metal edge funny, and yeah, shattered, and yeah. Got my thumb pretty good, so right on the knuckle, so I'm getting stitches. Usually I just super glue it up, but it's right on the frickin' knuckle, so it's just gonna keep popping open, so I gotta get real stitches and probably get back to work tonight. I was literally about 5 minutes into starting my work, and that's how she went, so on to the next one. Ciao, ciao for now, motherfucker!